Thanks for taking time out of your day to join Exidra for our webinar on the next generation demand planning for consumer goods, moving from S&OP to IBP. My name is Chris Rice, and I head up sales and marketing in North America for Exidra. I spent the last 3 decades in the CPG industry and have had an opportunity to work for and with many great organizations. And we're excited today to share Exidra's point of view on demand planning and the broader integrated business planning approach, as this has long been a challenge in the CPG industry and an area that is ripe for improvement. Joining me today is Richard Nicholas, who has a background in CPG with Gillette and other software providers, where he has gained expertise in demand planning, S&OP, IBP, and trade promotion management and optimization. Richard heads up sales and marketing globally for Exidra. So before we get started, the format today is listen only. So participants will be in listen-only mode, and any questions can be sent through the chat box. We will have a Q&A session at the end, or if you prefer, you can email myself or Richard directly, and our emails are displayed at the bottom of the screen. So the agenda, we will have a brief introduction to Exidra. We'll talk a little bit about integrated business planning for consumer goods, and we'll actually show you a demonstration of the demand planning solution. And we will summarize and then take questions. So Exidra is a global leader in integrated business planning for consumer products. We are a fast-growing entrepreneurial company. Globally, we have over 75 clients. Our global headquarters is located in London, as well as offices for the Americas based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in Asia Pac, based in Sydney, Australia. We are known for our powerful solution that has an intuitive, easy-to-use interface. We are also driven by our client success. Credentials, there are a number of logos on the screen, and this represents clients in the food and beverage industry across pharma and consumer electronics, where 100% of our focus is on the CPG industry. Hot off the press, we have received the Consumer Goods Technology Reader's Choice Award. We actually were selected in 2 categories this year, and that includes both the supply chain planning as the leader in customer satisfaction and the overall best in category for trade promotion management. Additionally, other awards that I would highlight, Exidra has been recognized by industry analysts as a leading integrated business planning solution. One quote I would call out is a quote from Mr. Dale Hagemeyer at POI, or the Promotion Optimization Institute, where he publishes the POI TPX Vendor Panorama. In this comparison report, Mr. Hagemeyer calls out some of our key differences, where the quote is a strong blend of analytics, usability, and industry expertise, and we often don't see this balance in other vendors. The solution that we will be talking about today is mainly a component of our supply planning suite, but I think it's important to highlight that this is a modular platform with a broad base of capability from supply across the trade promotion management and advanced business planning capabilities. And all of those modules sit on top of a foundation that allows us to bring in the appropriate data sources, manage that for our clients, as well as a number of capabilities around alerts and notifications, workflow and approvals, rules and validations, as well as a analytic engine underpinning the platform that feeds the science. And now I'm going to turn over the comm to Richard Nicholas.
Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So now I'm going to talk you through a few slides around our view of integrated business planning, and particularly what is relevant for the sort of consumer goods space. Then I'll talk about the application of Exceedra into support the integrated business planning process, and then we will have a short software demonstration so people can actually see the reality of the solution that we bring to the market. So I think always with these sort of webinars, it's worth starting off with a definition of what integrated business planning is. And I think I've obviously seen a number, and I'm sure you have, of different definitions, but this is, I think, a very simple one and accurately reflects the sort of definition of the integrated business planning. So the first statement is it's a repeatable process. So typically a monthly process with an annual planning process supporting it. And within that month, there are various steps, which I'm sure most people will be aware of. And we'll go into some detail later on in the webinar. It's also functional and cross-functional activities. So there are planning processes within departments such as demand planning. There'll be processes within finance, and there'll be processes within sales, for example. But where the sort of integrated part is, it becomes cross-functional. And I would say certainly in the consumer goods space, it is across different organizations. So if you're working in the consumer goods sector, you'll be generating joint business plans with retailers. So it's that connectivity to having very strong capabilities within departments, across departments, and with your partners and possibly suppliers as well. And I think the overall objective is to streamline and connect the strategic planning, the financial planning, and the operational execution plan. So they're the definition that we use, and we have built our solution around these sort of core objectives. So, you know, one thing that is a reality and what I think keeps most people interested and enjoying the sort of consumer goods sort of sector is there's a constant change. And you know, as an organization, you'll have to constantly navigate that change. So yeah, in the consumer goods sector, it will be pressure from retailers as that dynamic changes with the likes of Amazon coming into the market. There's always going to be pressure from the financial markets, particularly if you're owned by, say, a private equity company, that often they are driving the need for increased visibility, control of cost, etc. Obviously, the change in consumer behaviors. So the increase of health is driving consumer behaviors. The unpredictability of competition. So maybe you're looking at your competitors, and your competitors have one promotional strategy that was causing cannibalization, or that was predictable. This year, they're approaching the market in a different way, and their promotional strategy may have changed. And that you would see an impact onto your sort of demand as well. And also, the change in the retail landscape as well, with the rise of discounters, etc. Technology has also made how people are buying and purchasing has fundamentally changed this, and also you see this drives changing goals. So I think the need for agility and predictability is one of the things that is increasingly driving our customers to invest in technology solutions to support an integrated business planning process. So if we look at, what are the needs and what I would say we use and when we engage with people in the design principles of generating an integrated business planning process and enhancing your existing process. So the first fundamental pillar is having a single shared version of data for planning. I would say a good 50% of our customers prior to implementing Exceedra are turning up to meetings and looking at a forecast, and they have maybe 3 or 4 different versions of a forecast, one from sales, maybe the leadership's got one, there's finance, supply chain, all have different versions. And that is driven from different tools, but it's also driven maybe from different source datas, and often you see in consumer goods space that's maybe marketing are more looking at consumption type data, so what the consumer is, where supply chain are looking at shipments, and it's making sure that everybody has a shared data set that they can actually start building from assumptions from it. Coordinating multiple data sources, again, the same point, when was the data, what data are you looking at, when was it last updated, to make sure that's aligned. Collaboration we've already talked about across different business functions and with retailers. Having a very coordinated plan with the upstream and downstream plannings in a timely sort of process, and everybody understands when the deadlines are, what are their responsibilities to generate the plans, so with that process can work freely. Then the ability, often what we see in companies is that they're spending all month generating a plan, and all they've done is generated a plan. There's no actual optimization or validation of what they set out to do has actually been trained. So that ability to track, measure, and within month refine the plans and keep so there's that total visibility within the sort of organization. And then enhanced collaboration and communication. And I think probably one of the major reasons and drivers for people investing in technology solutions like we're going to show you today is around having an efficient process. So most companies have an S&OP process. They have some elements of an IBP sort of process, but it's the efficiency and the level of rigor that they're getting with that process. So, that's kind of the goals, I would say. So what do we see as the typical barriers and blockers for implementing or improving your existing IBP sort of process? So the first thing is probably some more structural pieces like the workflow. So often we find that sales, supply chain and finance are working on very different planning levels and hierarchies. So that's something that we would need to address if we're going to move to IBP. And then there's obviously the cycle times as well. Often we find that sales, for example, would enter their promotions in a tool, and then 4 weeks later finance would give them access to some view of the implications of that financial forecast. So what that means is that sales during their planning process really don't understand what the impact is unless it's like sort of 3 weeks later as part of the process. They haven't got the right level of visibility. And it's the same thing that feeds into this inability to quickly change plan and create those scenarios and then have that dynamic sort of planning capability as we go through. We talked about silos, so that visibility, and because everybody's using different data, we don't see that. Excel meetings, so who owns the Excel sheet is the master, and then everybody generally challenges the data in the Excel sheet. We've got limited data availability and inconsistency, so not having a sort of the mix of consumption data with the shipments data and having those multiple data sources to reconcile. I think the next point is around competency. I think this point about lack of leadership support is probably, in my mind, and I think most people who work in this space would say, is the primary enabler. If your leadership is behind implementing IBP, it happens incredibly quickly. If they're not behind it, you're just going to be having an uphill sort of battle. Lack of skills, so maybe it's a lack of skills in demand planning, a sort of team, or it may be a lack of skills in finance or sales. So those need to be addressed, and you should do some sort of readiness assessment prior to starting a sort of project like this. Another piece that is probably aligned to skills in many cases is lack of accountability, and maybe having organizational clarity of, what are people's roles and responsibilities, what are we expecting them to do, what level are they expected to sort of plan about that. So there's sometimes some, I would say, some human resources aspects that need to be dealt with as part of one of these projects. And then, we're a software provider, but I would put tool and technology. It is an enabler. Unless you've dealt with some of these issues on the, I would say, the first two boxes here, a tool and technology will not be the silver bullet. So it needs to be a combination of tool and technology and some change management to enable the tool to work sort of effectively. Okay. So, from an Exedra point of view, we've been in this market now for the best part of, I would say, 20 years, and understand businesses in the consumer goods sector, and also understand technology. And technology projects are never easy. I mean, we've got very satisfied customers, but they would always say that projects of this type are challenging. It involves change management. It involves some technical sort of aspects, and typically they will take 6 to sort of 9 months to sort of fully implement. So if we're going to set off on a journey like this, what we want to make sure is that the benefits are very secure, the benefits are very clear, and we are going to get a step change. What we saw, particularly as companies tended to approach this in a very piecemeal sort of manner, they may put a demand planning system in, they may put a trade promotion management system in, they may put a separate finance system. Each of those had a separate ROI. But what you end up with is it was not solving the integrated business planning sort of challenge. So what we have built is a solution that really allows you to sort of leapfrog, I would say, 2 of the maturity steps, moving directly from maybe a fairly rudimentary and basic setup to a more operationally optimized sort of setup. And if you're already operationally optimized, then we can start bringing in better analytics, and then bring you to a fully optimized sort of organization around the sort of integrated business planning process. So that's our goal, and then really how do we achieve that is the next slide. Then we're going to go into the sort of solution demonstration. So from the inception of Exedra, we understood that if we were going to bring a tool to the market, it needed to meet the needs of supply chain. It needs to meet particularly the needs of finance, sales, and then allow leadership to have that visibility that will allow them to sort of drive the business with more control, more trust, and allow to communicate between all those, I would say, those 3 sort of key sort of departments. So, the things that we've done is we realized that the consumer goods sector was different, particularly how the way it interacted with its customers, primarily retailers, and also of how demand was heavily influenced primarily by promotional activity. There are clearly seasonal activities such as weather that affect wholesalers, but the biggest cause of volume volatility is around promotional activity. So we had to have very strong capability in that space. We need in-memory processing. So we need to see, as soon as I make a change into the solution, the P&L or the profitability can immediately be understood by the user making that change. We need to have a single source of planning truth. People need to operate in different hierarchies, but you need to be able to reconcile that so everybody can look at the data, look at the system, says, I understand where that number comes from, I understand the assumptions behind that, and I can sign off those assumptions, and we can all align to that. We need a very strong scenario capability to allow you to do what-if analysis. And then we start bringing in other value-adding building blocks, such as predictive analytics. I think time series statistical forecasting is a fairly well-established sort of set of capabilities in terms of generating a forward forecast. But then we bring in artificial intelligence to do predictive analytics on movements in price, competitive activity, steal and cannibalization effects. And we need to bring that in a very easy to use and accessible way. There's a lot of, I would say, propeller heads out there that sit in dark rooms that can come up with all this predictive stuff. We're dealing with people that are salespeople, supply chain people that, have got a range of capabilities, and we've got to make sure that that capability is available to all. And then it's role-based access. if I'm a salesperson and I get given a supply chain solution, it's not going to work for me. So I need a solution that when I log into it, it feels like my solution that allows me to plan my area of the business in the best way possible. And then I can feed into the overall integrated business planning process. So if we look at a typical kind of S&OP sort of process that most companies, and I think this is fairly well established, you might have different levels of maturity in how it works, but most people would start with a supply chain plan, an operational plan, producing maybe a baseline forecast. Then it will go into the commercial or sales forecast, where they may overload their promotional activity. And often what you may see is quite a big disconnect, because the supply chain team will be working at maybe a planning group level, so there's different levels of aggregation, whereas the commercial teams will generally be working at a customer level. So yeah, we need to make sure there's reconciliation between them. Then most companies would have some sort of consensus sort of process, a demand review process, and that's often with sales, finance, and supply chain together, coming to a consensus. And depending on the maturity of the organization, those meetings may be very effective, or in the end, supply chain are just coming up with a number that they think is right, finance are coming up with a number that they think is right, and nothing really reconciles. Then you go to the kind of operational sort of exec review, and hopefully options are being presented with sort of pros and cons presented to the board, and then they can make decisions on data and judgment calls based on data they can understand and trust. And then it obviously moves around into the sort of monthly sort of process. And at the centre of that is obviously a constant sort of financial sort of review. And then this is a very similar sort of process that you would have for your annual planning process. So, as I've alluded to before, most companies have set off on a journey and bought different technology solutions. It may be with something like SAP, but SAP still struggles, I think, to provide this integrated flow. And what we also see is that people would have a system, but I would say most of the analysis and the what if capability is heavily supported by Excel. So you end up with the sea of Excel and multiple systems that technically may be integrated, but there are a lot of manual steps to make that data flow. And what we also find is there's a lot of calculation inaccuracies. So actually building a true P&L, allocating spend correctly, aggregating or disaggregating demand and volume correctly, there's a lot of error that is inbuilt within this I would say quite complex sort of planning architecture. So what do we bring to the table? I would say that we bring a single solution that allows people to do, as I said, each specialist area has the same tool, it's the same database, and will support this whole sort of flow. So what I plan to do is just give you really a flyby sort of view of all the different sectors and how it would look and feel for each department, and how we can reconcile this and bring this into one version of the truth for the organization. So it's built-in reconciliation of forecasts from the various sort of departments. Talked about the shared hierarchy. So, even though we may have different hierarchies in the business, we can reconcile to one organizational planning hierarchy. It's got integrated trade promotion management and optimization, including risks and opportunities management, so we can deal with that kind of building block methodology. And we have both internal and external integrated in it. So we'd have your shipments data, but we'd also bring in point of sale data or syndicated data as the data source. And then the sort of other piece that will be different today is the use of advanced analytics. So we have, like most demand planning tools, a time series forecasting engine, but we've got more sophisticated artificial intelligence-based predictive analytics for promotional uplift management, looking at the shape of demand, looking at any pantry loading effects, halo effects, and all of this is out of the box and very heavily industry tested algorithms that everybody would understand and can buy into. So what do we see as the sort of benefits that companies who implement this approach? I would say the number one benefit that we see and people would talk about is the improved visibility and the improved accountability. So we recently there is a sort of a $10 billion revenue food and beverage company that's one of our customers, and the owner of the company wanted to understand, what we're getting out of his Exidra platform, and he asked for a log on. He was trained within 2 hours, and then from that, he is now using the system and directing quite difficult questions to some of the senior leadership that he has, because from Exidra, he has got a visibility of supply chain, finance, and sort of commercial activities all in one system. Accuracy, obviously, the more accurate your plan, the better decisions you're going to get. Early warning of potential issues due to that integrated input. So often what customers would relay to us is, without Exidra, they would have not seen that, these accounts, based on the trend within the accounts and based on maybe the combination of a marketing and sort of commercial plan that's not quite right, or changes in competitor activity, they have spotted issues significantly earlier. So that could be, like a promotion that isn't running particularly well, they can react to that in the right way, or maybe getting better visibility of the overall or long-term trend. The other piece is efficiency. So, it's the amount of time to reconcile the various forecasts is all eliminated, because you get that element of trust in there. And what is the hard benefit? The fundamental hard benefit that we've seen from our customers, and they have quoted us on this and said that they've seen, 2% margin increases from from implementing Exidra, with obviously a change management program to support that. So they're very, very significant margin opportunities to be gained with the implementation of a solution and improving process as well. Okay. So I'm now hopefully, we've kind of covered the theory and the slides and some of our opinions on this space. But hopefully what we've tried to sort of get across today is, by having a tool that can support financial views, commercial forecasts, supply chain, we can really enable this IBP solution that, companies are, or CEOs are increasingly seeing as, the way to drive better bottom line sort of performance. So I'm now going to hand over to Chris, who I think, if there's any sort of questions, I think we can sort of go through this. So if you look on the sort of GoToWebinar, there's a question box. So if there's any questions that you have, please submit them in the question box, and we can hopefully answer any questions that we have.
Yeah, great, Richard. Thank you for that. We do have some questions coming in. Here's the first one. Where do you start this IBP journey? Which area? Do you start with supply chain or sales or finance, or do you have to do it all at once?
Chris, yeah, that's a great question. I think it comes back down to the point I made earlier. It depends on the level of leadership support that you have. The Exidra solution can be started in any part of the business. So it could start just from the supply chain and put in a demand forecasting capability. Then we could overlay another period, the commercial forecast. If you have that full leadership support and the organization is willing and able to support a wholesale change, I would do everything together, because the project will actually take still 6 to 9 months, but you will have to be applying change in several different departments at the same time, and that means that you have to have full leadership support. So the question is, depends on your personal situations within your organization.
Very good. Thank you, Richard. And yeah, the second question is, our company already has a demand planning system today. Do I need to replace this, to use Exidra, or can I use some of the other components without replacing the demand planning first?
Again, great question. I would say probably about 50% of our customers have an existing demand planning solution. simple question we would ask you is, are you happy with it? Does it work? If it does work, then we could build the other components around it and provide a very, I would say, real-time integration to those points.
Good, good. Here's another question that's come in. The data that is showed in the demo, is it stored somewhere in a data warehouse?
It's just part of the software, I would say, structure. So, the data can be exposed to a data warehouse. So if you've got an existing reporting tool, we could overlay that as well. So you don't need to use the reports within the tool, but it can be exposed to a data warehouse.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the industry. Some clients have moved forward with a demand signal repository type capability in which our solution, that actually makes our job easier. But where that doesn't exist, we help clients bring together the right data sources. So there is another question. How do I learn this tool? Do I need to configure many things? As per my company's requirements?
So the tool is very configurable. And as I said, realistically, we've done projects like this in 12 weeks. But yeah, the typical time, including the change management, is 6 to 9 months, I would say. And the tool is highly configured to your business requirements, and there's obviously full training applied to that process.
Very good. And looks like another one come in. The system looks great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Will I need more people to run Exidra? It looks like a much lower level of granularity. So,
yeah, great question. So, yes, the system is going to enable the whole business to work at a lower level of granularity and have better conversations. But by having it integrated, we're removing so many duplicate tasks. We're removing so many meetings where there's unnecessary reconciliation meetings, because all that reconciliation is automatically carried out within the sort of tool. So if I look at our customers, they have made a 0 headcount difference. I mean, yeah, sometimes they have reduced headcounts, sometimes they have increased it, but the net would be a 0 change, but you're doing more with the sort of assets, the data that you've got.
Very good. Well, it looks like we're about at the top of the hour, and thank you for today. I got one more question that has come in, and I think we have a few more minutes. It says, which are the basic requirements for the business to run Exidra as an IBP? Sales volume, SKU?
Yeah. Okay, great. So, we believe to run IBP, it is at SKU customer level. The system would run at day level as well. Whether a user is fully exposed to that is probably not so clear, but a promotional starts on the day of a week and ends on the day of a week. So if you're going to financially calculate the accrual correctly, you need to have that level of detail. But a demand planner will be more working at the sort of day level. So yeah, for us, we're generally getting customers down to SKU customer level. Demand planners again may work at a different level, but that's all part of the integrated platform.
Very good. So thank you everyone for spending your afternoon with us. We appreciate that. Certainly, if you would like more information on Exidra, you can find that on our website at www.exidra.com. Equally, you can also email Richard or myself with any further questions. Thank you again, and have a great afternoon.